Jael Monroe looked out the window of the small one-bedroom apartment on the north side of Atlanta, and for a long moment she wondered how her life had brought her here. The hum of city traffic below, a late autumn wind rattling the blinds, the stale scent of thrift store furniture, the memory of the laughter she used to share not so long ago with someone she thought would always be there. At 40 years old she had come to know more betrayals than she'd ever imagined. She saw them in the stack of unopened bills on the folding table in the corner, the vicious interest rates from payday lenders, the easy loan offers that turned into personal information nightmares, the phones that rang and rang with voices promising rescue while quietly siphoning away the last of her dignity. She thought about the day she lost her job at the community outreach center. She had believed in the mission, believed that her caring heart and long nights at the computer writing grant proposals would mean something. But when the funding dried up she got the call in the hallway, the HR woman polite, eyes avoiding hers, and Jael felt the ground drop. "We're sorry," she said, just 3 words that cracked something open. With her income gone, the credit card balances ran wild, rent crept upward, and her husband, Marcus, slid farther away than the bills ever had. Marcus had been charming, the kind of man who said "baby" with warmth, made Sunday brunch feel sacred, held their daughter Amari on his lap and told her she could be anything. But somewhere along the way the life they built, or the idea of it, started crumbling. Jael discovered an unfamiliar number on his phone late one night, a woman's voice, hushed, "I care about you," and the world shifted. Marcus admitted to an affair, claimed it was a mistake, pleaded tears she didn't trust. The heartbreak was raw, the betrayal shimmering in the mirror when she saw his things still in their closet. For Amari, their bright-eyed 12-year-old daughter, the revelation came in the form of tense breakfasts, hushed yelling in rooms Jael tried to keep locked. Yet Jael held her daughter loving firm, made sure she still cheered at Amari's school track meets, still helped with algebra and talked about college dreams, still tucked her in at night while her own mind raced through phone calls from debt collectors, fake investment managers, offering freedom if only she'd pay the upfront fee, emails saying her account had been compromised unless she sent bank details. She answered them a few times before realizing it was a trap, but not before losing a chunk of savings she'd set aside for a family holiday. The shame of it sat heavy in her chest, alongside the cold pit of anger at Marcus, at the system, at herself for trusting too much. There were nights when the darkness felt endless. She lay awake hearing Amari's soft breathing in the next room, and she wondered whether she was failing her child, whether her daughter would remember her as the parent who lost everything rather than the one who saved something. She thought of the times she'd insisted on pizza and movie night despite overdraft fees, the small gigs she took delivering food on weekends so she could keep her daughter's dance class going, the mornings she woke at 5, dressed in the mirror, forced on a professional smile at the temp agency, because her ego told her she could still contribute, she could still matter. And she did. In those moments she sat in front of the computer at the temp job, helping someone else's paperwork, while her own life unspooled quietly at home. Slowly, things shifted. She applied for unemployment, went to a free debt counseling service, swallowed her pride when she met with a financial advisor at the local credit union who talked plainly about bankruptcy and recovery. She sold off the heirloom china set she'd inherited from her grandmother and posted it online. The small sum bought groceries for weeks, and for a moment she felt relief, a weird mix of sorrow and resourcefulness. One Saturday morning she took Amari to the city park. They laughed on the swings, fed ducks by the pond, and in that bright midday sun, Jael let herself believe maybe there was still a horizon. She told stories of the grandmother who raised her, the home in rural Georgia where Sunday dinners meant everything, and Amari asked, "Mom, when can we go there again?" And Jael squeezed her daughter's hand and said, "Soon, baby, soon." Hope flickered. Then just when pieces seemed almost ready to fall into place, tragedy struck. Marcus's infidelity became a public spectacle when Jael's brother saw Marcus and the other woman at a cafe downtown. He texted Jael a photo. Her daughter found it on Amari's phone. "Look at what Dad did," and Jael's heart shattered all over again in the presence of her child. She confronted Marcus in the living room and he left that evening, leaving behind his half-packed bag and a silence thicker than any argument. For weeks the apartment echoed with emptiness. Bills still came, debt collectors still called. Jael grieved not only for the marriage she once believed in but for the version of herself who had trusted so deeply, who had let convenience and comfort lull her into believing she was safe. She grieved for the future she'd pictured, the family vacations, the college fund she hoped to build for Amari, the nights she pictured when Marcus and she would walk into retirement hand in hand. Yet in the despair she found something unexpected, a spark of self-worth, cold and steady, lighting upward from the whisper of, "I deserve better." She enrolled in a certification program at the technical college, studied nights while Amari slept, while her neighbors below argued about loud music, while the sky over Atlanta burned orange at dusk. She met a mentor in class, Tessa, a woman 10 years younger, energetic, business-savvy, who encouraged Jael with blunt honesty. "You're worth the investment," she told her. Jael sifted through the loan offers and chose a quiet, low-interest plan through a nonprofit. It would take years, but it was honest. The scam calls still came. "You've been selected for pre-approval. Your bank account is frozen unless you respond." And Jael hung up, blocked the numbers, laughed quietly when she realized how far she'd come. When she graduated from the certificate program, she landed a job as an administrative coordinator at a local nonprofit that helped women escape domestic abuse. The salary wasn't huge, but it was enough to breathe again, enough to send Amari to summer camp, enough to start putting aside a little toward that college fund, enough to pay down the worst of the credit card debt. She and Amari painted the living room a brighter color, soft teal, and it felt like a rebirth. The mornings were still hard, alarm at 6, commute across the congested highway, the occasional comment from coworkers, "You look tired," when she carried more weight in her mind than her shoulders, but she went anyway, because now she carried hope in her bones. There were evenings when she arrived home and found Marcus's toothbrush still in the holder and cried quietly in the kitchen, 2 slices of bread burnt in the toaster because she lost track of time. And then there were evenings when Amari ran to meet her, a beaming grin, and told her about a gold medal at track meet or a new book she read, and Jael wrapped her in her arms and felt the best kind of ache, not sorrow, but the fullness of love. The financial storms didn't vanish overnight. There were still overdrafts, still nights when she skipped lunch so Amari could have pizza with her friends, still sheets of paper with numbers and interest rates that made her chest tighten. But in those moments Jael remembered her grandmother's voice. "One day at a time, baby, one day at a time." She counted the days, measured progress not in zeros added but in debts deleted. In nights she slept without nightmares of the phone ringing. In mornings she faced the mirror and said, "I got you." Slowly the rent rose again and she worried, but then she reached out to the landlord, asked for a payment plan, held the line steady, and the landlord agreed. She told Amari that they were going to a small cabin in the Appalachians for weekend respite, just the two of them, no other grown-ups, no anywhere to go but the trail and the sky and the river. And the Sunday they left, the air smelled like pine and damp earth. Amari collected rocks and skipped stones and Jael remembered what it felt like to breathe deep and let go. In the evenings they sat by the fire and Jael told stories of the woman she used to be, and the woman she was becoming. Amari's laughter in the cabin made Jael's own belly ache with joy. Marcus called once, asking if they could meet to talk about closure. Jael listened, read the message twice, and then deleted it. She didn't feel anger, she felt calm. She felt the truth that what he took was just the illusion, the house, the promise, the ring, but he couldn't take the woman who rose, who refused to disappear. When tax time came, she filed her return herself, reminded herself of the deduction she was eligible for, and got a modest refund which she used to buy a new mattress for Amari's bed, a mattress she both of them deserved, a symbol that things were improving. One late morning on a crisp December day she met her friend Latrice for coffee at the small cafe they used to haunt before everything fell apart. Latrice asked how she was doing, and Jael realized she could say, "I'm fine," without lying. She also realized that fine didn't mean perfect, it meant present. The year turned, and Amari's school year ended with acceptance into the high school honors program, a victory that felt like a joint one. Jael celebrated by cooking a modest but beautiful Sunday dinner, roast chicken, collard greens, macaroni and cheese, and sweet potato pie. They set the table with mismatched plates and talked about Amari's dreams of studying environmental science, maybe one day working in clean energy because she wanted to save the planet like you save people, Mom. Jael felt tears come, not of sadness, but of pride. The apartment still had marks on the wall where Marcus's pictures hung, but those holes were starting to fill with Amari's art, watercolor trees, bold acrylic flowers, a collage of their weekend trips. Jael saved a little each month, $20 here, $30 there, into a jar she labeled "Fresh Start," and she watched it grow. She unsubscribed from newspaper ads promising easy money and get rich quick, and when the scammers called selling precious metals schemes, she laughed aloud because she recognized their voice, their desperation, and it no longer scared her. On a Saturday afternoon she walked through the park, bundled in a coat, listening to her breath cloud in the air, and she paused by a bench to reflect. She had lost a husband, yes, lost a job, yes, been seduced into a scam, yes, but she had also found her voice, her resourcefulness, her daughter's unwavering love, and a purpose that felt wider than she'd imagined. She enrolled in a community mentorship program for women, sharing her story to caution others, and one evening she met someone new, not a rebound, not a grand romance, but a kind-hearted partner named Andre who admired her strength and offered friendship without expectation. They sat one autumn evening on her small balcony, city lights glittering, and he said simply, "You're doing good." And she believed it. The debts were not wiped away, but they were shrinking. The scars of betrayal were not erased, but they were healing. The job was stable, the future was uncertain, and still for the first time in a long while Jael felt peace. She tucked Amari into bed, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "We made it this far, baby." In the quiet of the apartment she turned off the light, closed her eyes, and for minutes she let herself feel the fullness of survival, the weight of what she'd endured. The resilience that rose from every tear and failure, the hope that still glimmered in dawns yet to come. She didn't know where the road would lead. Maybe she'd get a promotion, maybe she'd move to a little house somewhere, not soon, but someday. But she knew this. Her worth was not tied to a paycheck nor a partner. It was carved into her marrow, layered into her story, unshakable. And that knowing washed through her like warm rain, gentle and steady, until she could rest. Winter thawed into early spring, and Jael found herself walking through Piedmont Park with Amari on a Saturday morning, the two of them wrapped in scarves, their breaths curling in the cool air, when a flyer for a women's small business workshop caught her eye pinned to a lamppost. She hesitated, the weight of self-doubt pressing against the small spark she'd nurtured in the past year, but she tugged Amari along, and they wandered to the community center where she found tables stacked with brochures, women chatting about ideas for jewelry lines, baked goods, tutoring services, and online boutiques. Sitting there, listening to women share their aspirations and struggles, she realized she wasn't alone. That survival wasn't just her own story, it was collective, threaded through the experiences of countless women in Atlanta, women who carried grief, debt, broken hearts, and still got up each day to fight for themselves and their children. That night she sat at the folding table in her apartment, opened her laptop, and began sketching ideas for a small online boutique selling handmade home goods, items that reflected warmth, beauty, and her vision of home as sanctuary. Amari perched on a stool beside her, asking questions about colors, fonts, and pictures, and Jael felt a swell of pride in teaching her daughter the courage to dream while simultaneously reclaiming her own. Marcus's occasional messages had slowed to a polite inquiry about Amari's well-being, and she responded with measured neutrality, protecting herself and her daughter without malice. Meanwhile, Andre's presence became a steady balm. He encouraged Jael's ambitions without rushing her, shared simple joys like Sunday morning coffee walks, and never demanded she forget the scars she bore. Slowly, the boutique gained traction, a few social media posts generating small orders that covered basic expenses, and Jael felt the familiar thrill of self-sufficiency growing into confidence. One afternoon, she received a call from a woman at the credit union she hadn't spoken to in months. Her advisor praised her for paying off the last of the payday loan, a debt she had thought she would never escape. Jael paused, letting the reality sink in. The suffocating weight had lifted, inch by inch, sacrifice by sacrifice, tear by tear, laughter threaded through the hardest moments. At Amari's 12th birthday party, held modestly in the backyard with homemade cupcakes, streamers Jael had painstakingly put together, and a small group of Amari's friends, she watched her daughter laughing, carefree, spinning in circles in a floral dress, and felt a deep ache of both loss and triumph. She grieved for what had been broken, the marriage, the trust, the illusions of permanence, but she also celebrated what she had reclaimed, autonomy, resilience, joy, and an enduring bond with her daughter. As the boutique grew, she hired a part-time assistant, a local college student named Maya, and found joy in mentoring someone else, guiding Maya through inventory, photography, and customer service, realizing that the wisdom she had gained through pain was a currency more valuable than money. Spring bled into summer, and Jael and Amari took a weekend trip to the Georgia coast, watching pelicans dive over the marsh and collecting shells that they painted together at night. Jael felt the long, steady pulse of life under her skin, sometimes slow, sometimes wild, sometimes crushing, sometimes light, and understood that survival wasn't linear, but a weave of struggle and reprieve, heartbreak and triumph. One evening, Andre invited Jael and Amari to a neighborhood cookout. Surrounded by music, laughter, and the smell of grilled vegetables and barbecue, she felt the community she had longed for, a chosen family of friends, neighbors, mentors, women and men who saw her, supported her, and reminded her that joy existed even after devastation. She spoke quietly with Andre while Amari ran off with new friends, and he said, "You've built something beautiful, Jael. Not just the business, not just the apartment, but you." She smiled, tears prickling, knowing it was true. She had built herself again. By the fall, she had cleared the last of her old credit card debt, deposited her first significant profit from the boutique into a savings account labeled Future, and watched Amari blossom into a confident, thoughtful young girl, aware of the hardships she'd endured but unshaken in her spirit. The apartment had grown into a home, fresh flowers on the windowsill, a new rug that Amari had picked, and the walls alive with art. Her daughter's watercolors, her own sketches for the boutique, framed postcards from family trips she had once thought impossible. The scars of Marcus's betrayal still lingered like shadows, sometimes tugging at her when she least expected it, but they no longer controlled her narrative. She responded to his occasional messages with calm and grace, and eventually he stopped reaching out altogether, allowing her the quiet closure she had earned. During the holiday season, Jael hosted a small gathering of friends. Women she had met through her boutique workshops, Andre by her side, Amari helping with decorations, and she realized that love had many forms, the love she gave herself, the love she nurtured for her daughter, the steady, patient love of friends, the tentative beginnings of romantic love that did not demand her surrender, and the love of her community that celebrated her progress. That night, as she tucked Amari into bed, Amari whispered, "Mom, we're happy, right?" Jael kissed her forehead and said, "Yes, baby, we're happy. We've worked hard, and we've earned this." She lingered in the doorway, watching her daughter sleep peacefully, the soft light illuminating her face, and for the first time in many years, Jael allowed herself to feel fully at peace, not because life was perfect, but because she had endured, adapted, and grown. The boutique continued to flourish, the financial stability she had once only dreamed of became tangible, and the bonds she had rebuilt, with herself, her daughter, her friends, and a cautious but promising love with Andre, formed a lattice of strength she could rely on. As she closed the apartment door that night and leaned against it, she reflected on the journey, the despair, the scams, the job loss, the heartbreak, the sleepless nights, the tears, the small victories, the laughter, the moments of grace, and the enduring sense that she could face whatever came next. In the stillness, Jael felt the deep pulse of life beneath her ribs, steady and persistent, and she whispered to herself, "We made it, Amari. We really did." And with that, she turned off the lights, knowing that the peace she felt was neither fleeting nor fragile. It was hard-won, real, and hers. Jael Monroe woke to the soft hum of morning light spilling across the living room, the smell of coffee brewing downstairs, and Amari's quiet footsteps padding toward the kitchen. And in that moment she felt a fragile sense of normalcy, a gift she had fought tooth and nail to reclaim. 40 years of living had taught her that peace was not a constant, that life could shift from laughter to despair in a single heartbeat, and yet here she was, still breathing, still standing, still planning, and it felt like a small miracle. The boutique, now running steadily with a handful of loyal online customers, brought not just income but purpose, and each package she packed herself was a reminder of her own agency, of her ability to build something meaningful from scraps of hope and perseverance, while the apartment, painted soft teal, smelled faintly of cinnamon candles she lit each morning to mark the day, a ritual of calm in a world that had long demanded vigilance. Amari bounded down the stairs, wearing a slightly crooked school uniform and a wide grin, and Jael's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and tenderness. She had fought to protect this child, to shield her from the worst of betrayal, to teach her resilience without burdening her with shame, and now, watching her daughter chatter about homework and friends. She felt the quiet victory of motherhood. Marcus had not contacted them for months. The occasional text asking about Amari had been deleted unread, a boundary Jael had carved carefully, and each day without him eroded the bitterness she had once nursed, leaving room for something softer, something regenerative. Andre, patient and unassuming, had become a quiet companion in her life, offering support without intrusion, sharing laughter without judgment, and proving that trust could be rebuilt slowly, cautiously, in the presence of someone who valued her autonomy as much as her company. Jael's days were a delicate balance between running the boutique, handling the bills that still arrived with a stubborn regularity, and cultivating her own self-worth, a balance she had learned through years of heartbreak and financial strain, through the sting of scams that had taken her last savings, through the ache of losing a marriage she had once believed was permanent. Some mornings, when the city traffic hummed like a distant heartbeat and the neighbors argued or laughed through thin walls, Jael paused with a cup of coffee in hand and acknowledged the journey she had traversed. The payday loans she had refused, the predatory calls she had ignored, the nights she had delivered food to strangers just to keep the lights on, the sleepless hours spent crying quietly while Amari slept, the evenings spent studying for certification programs she had almost abandoned. Out of despair. She had lost much, but she had gained clarity, resilience, and a vision for a future she could shape herself. Spring turned into summer with long, golden afternoons, and Jael and Amari spent weekends exploring Atlanta's hidden parks, small museums, and local festivals, the city that had once felt overwhelming and punishing now offering spaces of joy and discovery, and Jael felt a sense of belonging she had not known in years. The boutique allowed her to interact with a growing community of women entrepreneurs, each carrying stories of struggle, triumph, loss, and hope, and Jael found in them not only business guidance but friendship, laughter, and the affirmation that she was not alone. At night, she would sit at her laptop after putting Amari to bed, sketching new product designs, answering customer messages, and planning marketing strategies, feeling a rush of excitement that mingled with exhaustion, a reminder that her life was now shaped by her own hands, by her own vision, rather than dictated by debt collectors or a man who had betrayed her trust. On a particularly bright autumn afternoon, she received an unexpected email from a client who praised the thoughtfulness and quality of her work. Jael smiled, allowing herself a small victory dance in the kitchen, Amari watching with amusement and clapping along, and for the first time in a long time she felt the satisfaction of accomplishment untainted by fear or loss. The financial pressure, while still present, had lessened. She had negotiated with creditors, prioritized payments, and, most importantly, learned to discern between legitimate opportunities and predatory traps, a skill born of hard-earned experience that now fortified her confidence. During a quiet evening, Andre invited her for a casual dinner at his apartment. They cooked together, laughing over burnt onions and too salty pasta. Sharing stories of childhood and hopes for the future, and Jael felt the warmth of companionship without the shadows of expectation, a subtle but profound reassurance that love could exist without suffocation or betrayal. Amari's laughter became a soundtrack for her days, her energy a reminder of resilience and continuity, and Jael felt gratitude in moments both ordinary and extraordinary, the way the sun hit the balcony in the morning, the smell of her daughter's shampoo, the quiet pleasure of seeing her boutique thrive. Challenges arose, an unexpected medical bill, a glitch in the website, a harsh comment from a client, but Jael faced each with a calm born of experience, negotiating, problem-solving, and refusing to spiral into the panic that had once dominated her nights. The seasons continued to pass, painting the city in greens, golds, and reds, and Jael noticed her own transformation, her posture more confident, her voice steadier, her laughter easier and freer. The apartment walls, once bare and echoing the loneliness of a broken marriage, now displayed art and photos of adventures, products she had created, and snapshots of Amari's life, a gallery of survival and thriving. One chilly winter evening, after Amari had drifted to sleep, Jael wrapped herself in a blanket on the couch, looking out at the city lights flickering below, Andre sitting quietly nearby, and allowed herself to reflect on the journey, the pain of betrayal, the suffocating weight of debt, the small victories over scammers and deadlines, the nights of tears and fear, the mornings of determination and courage. She understood now that peace was not the absence of hardship but the presence of resilience, the ability to face each day with intention, to protect and nurture what mattered, to celebrate small joys, and to continue building toward a future that honored her worth. Jael had learned to forgive, not for Marcus, not for the pain inflicted, but for herself, for the release of carrying bitterness that no longer served her. She had learned that motherhood was both a source of strength and a mirror reflecting her own growth. She had learned that survival required vigilance, creativity, and patience. And in that moment, wrapped in the soft glow of the city lights, listening to the quiet breathing of Andre beside her, the gentle rhythm of life in her apartment, she felt a sense of completion, not an ending, but a peaceful equilibrium, a recognition that she had traversed darkness and emerged intact, capable of joy, capable of love, capable of hope, and capable of facing whatever storms the future might bring. Jael Monroe allowed herself a deep, steady breath, resting in the knowledge that she and Amari had endured, had built anew, and had discovered a peace neither bought nor given, but created through struggle, perseverance, and the unwavering pursuit of life's brighter moments. And in the quiet of that winter evening, she whispered softly to herself, "We made it, baby. We really made it." Jael Monroe sat at the small kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a warm mug of tea, watching the sunlight filter through the blinds, and she felt the strange comfort of survival, that fragile yet unbreakable sense that she had endured storms both external and internal, that she had confronted betrayal, financial devastation, and loneliness and had come out of it not untouched, for the scars were still there, but stronger and more determined than she had ever imagined. Her boutique had grown into more than just a side hustle. It was a symbol of agency, a testament to the work and patience it took to claim even a small measure of independence in a world that so often seemed designed to strip women like her of dignity and hope. The past still clung to her, the shadow of Marcus, the sting of being cheated on, the pang of wondering whether she had misjudged everything she had believed about love. But those memories no longer controlled her mornings or her evenings. Instead, they served as reminders of the resilience she had discovered in herself. Amari's laughter rang through the apartment as she chased the neighbor's cat across the balcony, and Jael allowed herself a small, secret smile, marveling at how the child's joy could break through the lingering heaviness of the world, how her daughter's curiosity and warmth had become a lifeline and a reason to keep moving forward, even on days when bills threatened to topple their carefully managed life. Andre, quiet and patient, had become a fixture in her world, not replacing what was lost, not rushing her into new commitments, but offering companionship, understanding, and support that felt different from the hollow promises she had once believed in, different from the manipulation that had once left her doubting her own worth. There were days when Jael found herself staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, tracing the fine lines at the corners of her eyes and the faint grays threading through her hair, and she marveled at how much she had endured, at how much grief, how many scams, how many financial missteps and betrayals she had survived. Yet here she stood, able to smile at herself with pride rather than regret. She remembered the weeks she had spent poring over bills, juggling deadlines, and crying herself to sleep while Amari dreamed peacefully beside her, and she felt both sorrow and awe at the strength that had emerged from sheer necessity, the creativity it took to turn borrowed ingredients into meals, the courage to negotiate with creditors she feared, the vigilance required to spot scams that promised quick money but threatened to swallow what little she had left. Slowly, gradually, the boutique became more than just survival. It became a reflection of her creativity, her vision, her taste, and her ability to connect with people who appreciated her work. Every package she sent out carried not just an item but a piece of herself, a quiet assertion that she was capable, talented, and worthy of recognition. One afternoon, while organizing a shipment, she noticed that her savings had grown enough to cover an emergency she had feared, a broken heater, a medical copay, and she paused to let the feeling of accomplishment sink in, the rare, liberating realization that she could now manage life's surprises without panic, that her hard work was tangible, and that she was reclaiming control in a world that had often felt hostile. Amari bounded into the room, eyes wide with excitement about a school project on local history, and Jael found herself explaining, guiding, encouraging, but also learning alongside her daughter, realizing that teaching Amari about resourcefulness and resilience was itself a healing process, a reaffirmation that she could turn her pain into wisdom for the next generation. Andre came over that evening bearing groceries, a small gesture that had grown into a pattern of support, and they cooked together in the cramped kitchen, laughing over spilled flour and burnt edges on the bread, and Jael realized how important ordinary, shared moments were, the quiet intimacy of connection without expectation, the slow building of trust, the steady presence of someone who respected her boundaries while still offering care. The neighborhood around them had grown into a community of familiarity, where faces at the corner store recognized Jael and Amari, where small acts of kindness from neighbors reinforced that she wasn't invisible, that her struggles mattered, that survival did not have to be solitary. And yet, even with these joys, life continued to challenge her. One afternoon she received a call from a scammer posing as a debt consolidation service, and instinctively she hung up, heart hammering, reminding herself of the years she had spent being preyed upon by people who saw her desperation as an opportunity. The adrenaline lingered, and she spent that evening double-checking her accounts, securing passwords, and teaching Amari the basics of caution in a world that often exploited trust, realizing that protecting herself and her daughter was an ongoing responsibility that required vigilance, education, and courage. As autumn deepened, the boutique's growth allowed her to invest in better packaging and to hire a part-time assistant, Maya, a college student with energy and ideas, and Jael discovered that mentoring someone else gave her a renewed sense of purpose, a way to share not just skills but lessons learned from hardship, and she saw in Maya a reflection of herself, a young woman full of potential, but navigating a world that didn't always value honesty, integrity, or effort. They spent hours brainstorming marketing strategies, experimenting with product photography, and laughing at mistakes, and Jael felt an unexpected glow of pride. Not only was her business thriving, but she was nurturing someone else's potential, adding layers of meaning to work that once felt purely transactional. Meanwhile, Marcus's intermittent messages had ceased entirely, leaving Jael free from the subtle anxiety of anticipating disappointment, betrayal, or manipulation, and in the vacuum left by his absence, she discovered a new emotional freedom, a space where she could breathe and imagine a future unburdened by past mistakes. One crisp evening, Andre suggested a weekend getaway to the Georgia coast, just the two of them and Amari, and Jael agreed, feeling a flutter of excitement she hadn't allowed herself in years. Standing on the beach, sand cool under her bare feet, waves rolling in rhythmically, Amari shrieking as she chased seagulls, Andre holding her hand, she felt the rare, luminous sensation of unadulterated joy, a momentary suspension of the burdens that had defined her life for so long. The boutique orders kept coming, finances were manageable, and the apartment, once a space of quiet despair, now reflected the vibrancy of their lives, shelves lined with books and products, walls adorned with art, both her own and Amari's, and corners arranged for comfort and utility, a testament to the life they had worked to build. Jael realized, with both awe and relief, that she had cultivated something far more enduring than material security, a life infused with purpose, love, and agency, a life where each day brought small victories and moments of wonder, where challenges still arose but were met with preparation and grace. She remembered the nights she had cried herself to sleep, the times she had felt the sting of betrayal, the moments of financial terror, and she acknowledged them not with shame but with gratitude, for each had sharpened her instincts, built her patience, and fortified her spirit. By winter, Jael and Amari had developed a rhythm, a cadence of life that balanced work, school, and play. Andre remained a quiet, stabilizing presence, offering laughter, counsel, and companionship without overstepping boundaries, and Jael felt a sense of gratitude she had thought impossible just a few years prior. Holiday lights twinkled along the streets as she walked hand in hand with Amari, bundled against the cold, and Jael marveled at the simple pleasure of being able to provide warmth, security, and joy. The weight of the past lifted enough to allow genuine, unguarded smiles to return. She hosted a small gathering of friends and neighbors, their laughter and shared food filling the apartment with warmth, and she realized that love and family could take many forms, through friendship, mentorship, romantic trust earned slowly, and the deep, abiding bond between mother and daughter. Jael had learned to forgive, not the people who had hurt her, but herself, for staying in situations too long, for trusting too easily, for letting fear dictate her actions, and she discovered that forgiveness was less about absolution than about freedom, a release that allowed her to step into the fullness of life without carrying unnecessary weight. She reflected on the journey, the debt, the scams, the heartbreak, the late nights, the tears, the victories, and recognized a pattern. Each challenge had been met with resilience, and each victory, no matter how small, was hard-won and deserved celebration. As she tucked Amari into bed, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "We made it, baby," Jael felt the totality of her growth, the arc of survival, and the promise of continuity, a life rebuilt from fragments, strengthened by trials, and illuminated by love and hope. Jael Monroe woke to the quiet rhythm of the city outside her apartment, the soft hum of traffic blending with Amari's excited chatter as she prepared for school, and she felt the warm, steady pulse of life that had returned to her after years of uncertainty, after betrayals that had once made her question her worth, after nights when the weight of debt and the sting of Marcus's infidelity had seemed insurmountable. Now, as she sipped her tea and watched her daughter pack her bag with mismatched socks and a bright grin, Jael recognized the fragile beauty of survival, the triumph in each small choice that allowed them to continue building their lives despite the shadows of the past. The boutique had grown steadily, a lifeline forged from her own creativity, determination, and long nights of effort. Each shipment sent a quiet victory against the forces that had once tried to strip her of independence, and she marveled at how far she had come, from juggling payday loans and predatory calls to managing inventory, marketing, and customers with a grace born of hard-won experience. Andre, quietly supportive and patient, had become her anchor, showing her that love could be steady without being possessive, and that companionship could be built on trust, respect, and shared laughter rather than manipulation or unmet expectations. Their weekend walks in the park, cooking experiments, and occasional trips to the coast had begun to feel like small celebrations of life reclaimed, moments that stitched together a patchwork of normalcy and joy she had once feared unattainable. Yet even in these brighter days, shadows lingered. Unexpected bills reminded her of financial vulnerability, and the occasional scam attempt or spam email made her pulse quicken, a reflex shaped by years of exploitation. But these moments now sparked vigilance rather than panic, proof that she had learned not just to survive but to anticipate, protect, and adapt. Almari's school projects, neighborhood friendships, and endless curiosity became a mirror of Jael's own growth. The child's joy was a daily affirmation that the life they were crafting together was worthy, that each decision Jael made, whether a creative choice in the boutique, a careful negotiation with a creditor, or the gentle guidance of her daughter's moral compass, was meaningful and consequential. As winter deepened, the apartment transformed into a cozy haven, walls lined with art and snapshots of small adventures, the scent of cinnamon and baked goods drifting from the kitchen, and Jael allowed herself the rare indulgence of sitting back and simply breathing, acknowledging that she had endured storms she once thought unmanageable, and yet here she was, standing, capable, and whole in a way that felt quietly miraculous. Business growth brought new challenges and rewards. Hiring Maya, a college student, infused fresh energy into the boutique, and mentoring her reminded Jael of her own journey. The lessons learnt. Jael Monroe woke to the quiet rhythm of the city outside her apartment, the soft hum of traffic blending with Amari's excited chatter as she prepared for school, and she felt the warm, steady pulse of life that had returned to her after years of uncertainty, after betrayals that had once made her question her worth, after nights when the weight of debt and the sting of Marcus's infidelity had seemed insurmountable. Now, as she sipped her tea and watched her daughter pack her bag with mismatched socks and a bright grin, Jael recognized the fragile beauty of survival, the triumph in each small choice that allowed them to continue building their lives despite the shadows of the past. The boutique had grown steadily, a lifeline forged from her own creativity, determination, and long nights of effort. Each shipment sent a quiet victory against the forces that had once tried to strip her of independence, and she marveled at how far she had come, from juggling payday loans and predatory calls to managing inventory, marketing, and customers with a grace born of hard-won experience. Andre, quietly supportive and patient, had become her anchor, showing her that love could be steady without being possessive, and that companionship could be built on trust, respect, and shared laughter rather than manipulation or unmet expectations. Their weekend walks in the park, cooking experiments, and occasional trips to the coast had begun to feel like small celebrations of life reclaimed, moments that stitched together a patchwork of normalcy and joy she had once feared unattainable. Yet even in these brighter days, shadows lingered. Unexpected bills reminded her of financial vulnerability, and the occasional scam attempt or spam email made her pulse quicken, a reflex shaped by years of exploitation. But these moments now sparked vigilance rather than panic, proof that she had learned not just to survive but to anticipate, protect, and adapt. Almari's school projects, neighborhood friendships, and endless curiosity became a mirror of Jael's own growth. The child's joy was a daily affirmation that the life they were crafting together was worthy, that each decision Jael made, whether a creative choice in the boutique, a careful negotiation with a creditor, or the gentle guidance of her daughter's moral compass, was meaningful and consequential. As winter deepened, the apartment transformed into a cozy haven, walls lined with art and snapshots of small adventures, the scent of cinnamon and baked goods drifting from the kitchen, and Jael allowed herself the rare indulgence of sitting back and simply breathing, acknowledging that she had endured storms she once thought unmanageable, and yet here she was, standing, capable, and whole in a way that felt quietly miraculous. Business growth brought new challenges and rewards. Hiring Maya, a college student, infused fresh energy into the boutique, and mentoring her reminded Jael of her own journey, the lessons learned through hardship, the importance of patience, courage, and integrity, and the satisfaction of seeing someone else thrive because of the guidance she offered. Days flowed into nights with a rhythm that was both demanding and comforting, packing shipments late into the evening, checking emails, brainstorming designs, studying trends, all punctuated by shared dinners, laughter, and quiet talks with Andre, whose calm presence was now woven into the fabric of her everyday life. Occasionally, the past intruded, memories of Marcus, the sting of betrayal, the times she had been financially cornered, but instead of breaking her, these recollections reinforced her vigilance, reminding her of the worth she had fought to reclaim and the boundaries she now enforced with quiet authority. Holiday seasons brought both joy and reflection. She celebrated with Amari, friends from the neighborhood, and Andre, hosting small gatherings filled with laughter, warmth, and the reassurance that family could be chosen as much as inherited, that love and support existed in forms beyond the romantic or conventional. Jael continued to navigate her world with a careful balance of hope and pragmatism, teaching Amari lessons about resilience, honesty, and self-respect while simultaneously cultivating her own emotional and financial security, recognizing that each day presented both trials and opportunities, and that the ability to embrace joy in the present was as crucial as planning for the future. She reflected on the years of hardship, the sleepless nights, the financial crises, the scams that had preyed on her desperation, the crushing weight of betrayal, and felt a sense of quiet triumph, not because the pain had disappeared, but because she had learned to face it, integrate it, and move forward without letting it define her identity. One spring morning, as she prepared for a local craft fair with her boutique items, Jael marveled at the life she had reconstructed. Orders were arriving steadily, customers offered kind feedback, her relationship with Andre had deepened into trust and mutual support, and Amari thrived in school and in their neighborhood, a vibrant reflection of the security and love that surrounded her. Even setbacks, an online order delayed, a minor plumbing issue in the apartment, or the lingering threat of a financial surprise, were met with measured solutions rather than panic, testament to the resilience and skill she had honed over years of struggle, and each problem solved was a reminder that she had the power to shape her own reality. Jael understood now that peace was not the absence of adversity, but the presence of strength, clarity, and the ability to cherish the moments that mattered, shared laughter with Amari, quiet conversations with Andre, the thrill of seeing her boutique succeed, and the simple pleasure of evenings spent in a warm apartment filled with light, art, and love. Over time, her life had become a tapestry woven from threads of pain, resilience, joy, and triumph, and she saw clearly that each hardship had added depth to her character, each victory, no matter how small, had reinforced her agency, and each act of love, toward herself, her daughter, and others, had solidified the foundation upon which she continued to build. Jael knew that the world could still present challenges, financial instability, occasional scams, the unpredictable chaos of life, but she now faced them with an inner strength that was both hard-earned and unwavering, a knowledge that she was capable of navigating storms while protecting her daughter and preserving her own integrity. She celebrated these victories quietly, often with a cup of tea in the early morning light, listening to Amari's laughter and the city's hum, feeling a profound sense of gratitude that permeated even the mundane, for a functioning home, for meaningful work, for connections that nurtured rather than drained, and for a life that, though tested, had emerged both vibrant and whole. In the late afternoons, Jael and Amari sometimes walked to the park near their apartment, collecting fallen leaves, discussing dreams for the future, and marveling at the simple pleasures of a life reclaimed from adversity, while Andre's steady presence offered a quiet reassurance, a reminder that companionship could exist without fear, without betrayal, and that trust could be earned and honored. And as she lay in bed some nights, reflecting on the journey, from the crushing weight of debt and heartbreak to the small but persistent victories of entrepreneurship, love, and motherhood, Jael felt a profound sense of closure, not because every hardship had vanished, but because she had discovered within herself a depth of resilience, a capacity for joy, and a peace born from the knowledge that she had endured, rebuilt, and thrived. She understood, finally, that life was not measured solely by the absence of pain but by the strength to continue, the courage to embrace love again, and the ability to recognize the beauty and hope in ordinary, everyday moments. Jael Monroe, 40 years old, strong, resilient, and tender, closed her eyes with a smile, feeling Amari's small hand on hers and Andre's quiet breathing nearby, and allowed herself to rest in the knowledge that, after heartbreak, hardship, and countless trials, she had not just survived, she had built a life rich in love, purpose, and peace, and she knew that whatever the future might hold, they would face it together, unshaken, and with hearts open to hope. Spring deepened in the city, and Jael Monroe felt the subtle shift of hope in the air, the sense that life was finally bending in their favor. Though she remained vigilant, aware that the past had taught her lessons no peace of mind could erase entirely, the boutique flourished, online orders arriving steadily, each package she wrapped and labeled a small victory over the years of financial struggle, scams, and manipulations that had once left her anxious and drained, and she marveled at how these ordinary acts, carefully balancing books, negotiating with vendors, answering customer emails, had become a testament to her resilience and independence. Amari's school year brought its own milestones, triumphs that filled Jael with pride, a science fair award, a new friendship with a classmate named Kayla, and the constant sparkle of curiosity that reminded her daily that life could still hold delight even after heartbreak. She found herself coaching Amari through small challenges with patience, teaching her lessons about perseverance, fairness, and kindness, and in doing so, rediscovered her own capacity for joy and optimism. Andre, steady and thoughtful, had grown into a quiet presence of unwavering support, helping with minor repairs around the apartment, sharing meals, listening when Jael needed to vent about business or old wounds, and providing a sense of safety that contrasted sharply with the betrayal and instability she had endured with Marcus. With him, love no longer carried the sting of doubt, but was instead a shared, intentional effort to create stability, happiness, and trust. Yet life was not without its reminders of fragility. One afternoon, a letter arrived from a creditor, an error threatening to add late fees to a long paid-off account, and Jael felt the familiar flare of anxiety, but this time she approached it methodically, calling, disputing, documenting, and resolving the problem within days. Proof that her past struggles had forged both resilience and strategic thinking, and that she could now navigate adversity without being overwhelmed. The boutique, meanwhile, became a hub not just of commerce but of connection. Customers praised her designs, sought her advice, and even shared snippets of their own lives with her, and Jael realized that in helping others, she was finding a deeper sense of purpose, a reminder that despite hardship, she could cultivate beauty and joy in ways that resonated beyond herself. One weekend, she organized a small pop-up market in the neighborhood, bringing together other local creators, including Maya, who had blossomed under Jael's mentorship, and the event became a celebration of creativity, community, and the simple power of persistence, leaving Jael with the satisfying sense that her efforts were building more than just financial stability. They were contributing to a world that valued integrity, art, and human connection. Amid these successes, Jael continued to navigate the complex terrain of personal life. Andre and she shared quiet dinners, occasional laughter-filled arguments over burnt cookies or mislaid shopping lists, and tender moments that were all the more precious for their simplicity, while Amari thrived, her laughter echoing through the apartment and serving as a constant reminder of what Jael had fought so hard to protect and nurture. Occasionally, Marcus's name would flash across her mind, a ghost of past pain, but she acknowledged it without allowing it to dominate her present. She had learned to separate the lessons from the hurt, recognizing that his betrayal had shaped her vigilance and her capacity to value herself, but it no longer dictated her emotional landscape or her expectations for the future. Summer brought heat, laughter, and a renewed sense of possibility. Jael took Amari and Andre to the coast, where sand and surf erased the last traces of lingering fear, and she watched her daughter run freely along the shoreline, the wind catching her curls and laughter spilling into the salt-tinged air, and Jael felt a deep, almost sacred, sense of completion, a realization that while the road had been difficult, the destination, even if temporary and ever-changing, was worth every struggle endured. At night, as they returned to the city apartment, the small rituals of their life, the folding of laundry, the planning of shipments, quiet talks before bed, took on a sacred quality. Each ordinary act was infused with gratitude, a recognition of survival, a celebration of agency, and a quiet defiance of the hardships that had once seemed insurmountable. By fall, Jael had begun hosting small workshops for young women in the community, teaching entrepreneurship, financial literacy, and creative expression, and she discovered that sharing her story, her missteps, her heartbreaks, her recoveries, was both healing and empowering, transforming pain into knowledge, fear into confidence, and loneliness into collective strength. The boutique continued to thrive, new product lines launched with careful planning, and Jael felt an unprecedented sense of mastery over her life. The tools of survival had become the instruments of her prosperity, the lessons of heartbreak now guides for loving wisely, and the scars of betrayal had become markers of growth rather than sources of shame. Winter returned, and with it came reflection. As she sat in the soft lamplight, sipping tea and listening to the city hum below, Jael acknowledged the journey, the crushing weight of debt, the sting of infidelity, the nights of despair, but she also celebrated the victories, large and small, the love she had found in Andre, the joy she nurtured in Amari, the independence she had fought for and achieved, and the meaningful work she now pursued daily. In the quiet hours, she allowed herself to feel the fullness of life, the ache of loss, the surge of joy, the calm of stability, and the hopeful anticipation of what was still to come, and she realized that peace did not mean the absence of hardship, but the presence of resilience, agency, and love. That true contentment was born from accepting life in its entirety. From embracing both sorrow and triumph, and from recognizing the beauty in ordinary moments, in human connection, and in the courage to continue despite uncertainty. Jael Monroe, 40 years old, tempered by experience, radiant in her survival, and filled with the quiet strength of a woman who had endured, loved, and rebuilt, finally felt a sense of completion, not because life was perfect, but because she had emerged whole, capable, and unshaken, surrounded by a daughter whose laughter lit every corner of her world, a partner whose steady presence affirmed that love could be gentle and unwavering, and a life she had carved from struggle into a sanctuary of hope, growth, and peace. And as she lay in bed that night, the soft sounds of Amari's breathing and the city outside lulling her into rest, Jael let herself finally exhale, knowing that whatever storms might come, she was ready, and that she had, at last, arrived at a place where heartbreak, hardship, and hope coexisted in a quiet, enduring harmony, allowing her to close her eyes with gratitude, relief, and the unshakable certainty that life, with all its trials, had led her exactly where she needed to be.